Ladies and gentlemen, purveyor of fine words and phrases, master storyteller, Dylan Brody.
Thank you very much and good evening. There's a particular piece that I wish to present this evening. But before I get to this piece, I feel it is helpful if you have a little bit of background information on who I am and what I'm about. When I was an infant, I spiked a very high fever. My parents rushed me to the hospital. I was surrounded by concerned doctors and worried nurses. My grandparents drove up from New Jersey. They gathered in the hospital room. I was packed in ice. I was wrapped in alcohol-soaked sheets. And eventually, my fever broke. There was concern about brain damage. If you ask me, the jury is still out. They wanted to test, but I was an infant. So the doctor could not say, do you know who the president is? Do you know what month it is? And so on. The only way they could test for brain damage was to find out whether I remembered the one trick I had learned up until that point. My mother would say, "Hooray for Dylan," and I would clap. So my mother said, "Hooray for Dylan," and I clapped, and the room full of worried doctors and concerned nurses and frantic parents and horrified grandparents burst into adoring, relieved laughter and applause. Let us review. My very first social experience on planet Earth was "Hooray for Dylan," followed by laughter and applause. Surely somewhere in my tiny little prelingual infant brain, I thought, so far this is going very well. It is the nature of the human experience and operant conditioning that since that time I have been seeking out exactly that sequence of events and then looking for something to suck. Now, when I was about 4 years old, my family moved to a small town in upstate New York called Schuylerville, New York. We drove all night long in a huge pink Plymouth, a vehicle from which, in time of emergency, smaller vehicles could easily be launched. I was young, but my reading skills had already developed to such an extent that as we drove into town, by dawn's first dim pink light, I was able to read the sign that said, "Welcome to Schuylerville, population 954. And to give you a sense of what sort of town this is, that afternoon, the old white-haired mayor himself drove out to the sign with a bucket o' paint and in a Norman Rockwell gesture, because we had moved in, amended the sign to say, "And some Jews." I was raised by academic intellectuals, and I was raised to believe that academic intellectualism was inherently superior to physical prowess of any kind. But in Schuylerville, kids played Little League, so I signed up for Little League. I was not good at Little League. My ability to catch and bat was severely impeded by a tendency to close my eyes and hide my face when a ball came near me. I was assigned to a position called deep left field. It was a position created specifically for me, 40, 50 yards beyond the actual left fielder, where there was no chance I would ever be involved in any of the actual game. I could stand out in the deep weeds and stare at the clouds and imagine the animals. One afternoon, my father came to see me play on a Saturday. And he sat in the bleachers with the other parents, and as so many parents are, he felt compelled to shout encouragement to his son in his endeavors. But he was a teacher of theater and English at a liberal arts college nearby. He was the man from whom I had learned my non-athleticism. He had never internalized phrases like get in the game or keep your eye on the ball. So as I stood out in the deep weeds, swatting at gnats and praying that no ball should ever come to me, I heard my father's voice drifting out over the green as he shouted, "Dylan, leap into the present moment!" And I knew at once that this would be one more reason for my teammates to brutalize and ridicule me. This was not the only place that I was ridiculed and brutalized. I was beaten up regularly on my way home from school. I remember once sitting with my father and saying, "I don't understand why they hate me so much." And he said, "Dylan, they don't hate you. They envy you, your intelligence and your wit and your ability to make your teachers laugh and your good grades and your nonviolent relationship with your parents." He did not explain to me that it wouldn't help to explain this to the bullies. It was more useful than my mother's advice. She said, "Dylan, not everybody you meet in life is going to like you. The sooner you can accept that, the sooner you can stop trying to win my affection." At one point, I sat down with my father on the steps in front of our house, and I said, "Dad, I hate Little League. I hate it. I hate everything about it. I hate the practices, and I hate the riding to and from the park on my bike with the glove, and I hate the games, and I hate the catching and the throwing, and I hate the batting, and the glove makes my hand all sweaty." And he said, "Well, Dylan, I went into the doctor. I said, it hurts when I do this." He said, "Then don't do this." I stared at my father at 11 years old, not yet familiar with rhetorical allegory. And he said, "Dylan, it's an old joke. The point is, you can stop if you want." That thought broke on me like that first burst of cool rain at the end of a long, hot, muggy spell. The idea that I could stop doing that which caused me discomfort and unhappiness. It was my first taste of self-determination. I could quit doing that which caused me displeasure. Oh, I quit Little League. I took up the life of the academic and the intellectual, and I read a lot, and I pretended that I genuinely believed that academic intellectualism was inherently superior to physical prowess of any kind. My father was a fairly good man. He tried hard to teach me things that would be useful. He taught me that it was okay to cry, that it was okay to express my own feelings. But because of who he was, it never occurred to him to teach me that sometimes I would have to be strong, or even that I could. Forgive me, when I perform, I sweat like Rush Limbaugh coming off OxyContin. I have this fear that someone's going to write a review of me saying, "See Mr. Brody, he's a brilliant storyteller, but see him in a well-ventilated space. Once he sweats through his cologne, he begins to smell like an angry caribou." In order to drag you toward the present at the speed of text, let me offer up some of you, those of you who are familiar with my work, and really who isn't, may have heard this before. If that is the case, I apologize, but I'll try to make it fast. I moved to Los Angeles with $500 in my pocket and a meeting with a producer who said he loved my first screenplay. So on the appointed night, at the appointed time, I went to the Paramount lot, and I went to his office, where he again told me that he loved my work, but that he could not put down money on the script until I did some rewrites on the third act. So I took some of my $500 and I bought a portable typewriter and I went and stayed on a friend's couch, and during the day I did the rewrite, and on the appointed day, at the appointed time, I showed up on the Paramount lot just in time to find a custodial worker scraping the producer's name off the office door with a razor blade. And my triumphant arrival in the City of Angels was not exactly what I had thought it was going to be, but I was young and I was energetic and I could talk, and I had been a regular at the Improv in New York since the time I was 17, so everything was going to be fine. I went to the Improv on Melrose. And I said, "Hi, I'm a regular at the Improv in New York." And they said, "We don't care. The owner's wife got that one in the divorce." Wow. But I was young and I was energetic and I could talk, and I convinced them that they should give me a showcase. And on a Tuesday night, I came into the club. At the appointed time, I went up to the MC and I said, "After this guy is off, I'm going up. Expectations are very important. I want you to tell them that you're very excited to have me here, that I'm a special guest, that I've been in New York, where I was working in the film and television industry." This was all true. I had been a production assistant on Crocodile Dundee and the Cagney and Lacey New York shoot. I said, "Tell them you're very excited to have me here." And he said, "I know how to do my job, go wait in the back." And I stood in the back of the room as he went on stage, and he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, the Hollywood Improv is very proud to present a special guest." And there was a murmur in the room because this was the mid-'80s. Ronald Reagan was president, though he did not know it at the time. This was the time during which people came to the Improv specifically to see very special guests that we were excited to have. And he said, "He's been in New York, he's just come back from shooting a major motion picture release." And I said, "Not exactly what I was asked for, but I asked for the right thing. I have plausible deniability." He said, "Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm Improv welcome." I shifted my weight forward onto the balls of my feet to move toward the stage, as he said, "For Robin Williams." And Robin Williams blasted past me, and he took the stage, and he joked and sweated, and he was hilarious for 45 minutes. And then he said, "Thank you very much, good night," and he came off stage. People signaled their waiters for their checks, and they began to hand in credit cards as the MC went back up on stage and said, "All right, this next guy is from New York. Dylan, why don't you come up and show us what you got?" And I took the stage to a walking ovation, ladies and gentlemen. I told wry political jokes to a group of people that was no longer an audience. They were now just a group bottlenecking at Negress. And my stunning showcase at the Hollywood Improv was not exactly what I thought it was going to be, but I was young and I was energetic and I could talk. So I went up the street to the Comedy Store, where I got a job answering the phones that paid not enough to rent an apartment. And I answered the phones during the day, and at night I stole stage time at the end of the show if there was any audience left in the room at all. And then I would sleep on the roof of the club in a space that I found out one rainy night was designed to channel water away from an entrance. So I found old newspapers, and I dammed up a little dry space for myself, and from then on, if it looked like rain, I hid out in the club till all the doors were locked, and then I slept on a booth upstairs in the belly room, the small development room for newbies, because I had so thoroughly internalized the psychotic status system of this club that even as a vagabond, I didn't feel I was ready for the main room. And one night, I stole stage time at the end of a show. And afterwards, a woman came up to me and told me that she thought I was very funny. And she invited me to her home in the Hollywood Hills, where I had sex with her and her boyfriend, because they gave me a lot of cocaine and hinted at a guest house I might be able to stay in. And that night, as I walked the long, winding, dark road back down to the club, I was incredibly happy, partly because they'd given me a lot of cocaine, and mostly because she had said that I was funny. And it didn't occur to me until many years later that I had been homeless and a prostitute. But that night, as I went to sleep in my little tar paper rain gutter depression, it did occur to me that adulthood was not going exactly the way I had thought it was going to be. But I was young and I was energetic, and over time I got more work on the road. I began to open for people and then to feature for people, and all over the country I took the stage in double-breasted false bravado, and I prayed that the audience would not see through my wardrobe and my wit to realize that I was a fake and a fraud, that I was a freak and a phony. And I was not George Carlin, and I was not Bill Hicks, and I was not Lenny Bruce, and my firm commitment to the truth was not exactly what I had thought it was going to be. And after the shows, I would work the crowds, or I would go to the local bars to try to find women who might indulge my dark fetishes and personal perversities, and failing to find them, I would weep alone in stoned hotel rooms, and I was not James Bond, and I was not Hawkeye Pierce, and my psychosexual persona was not exactly what I had thought it was going to be. And then, one night, I went into a coffee house and I met this woman. She was managing the coffee house, and I flirted with her, and it worked. And I hung out late into the night, and she kept refilling my cup, and we talked, and we laughed, and finally I asked her out on a date, and she said yes. And that night, as I drove back to my little studio apartment, I realized that I could imagine spending a lifetime with this woman. But I knew that eventually she would find out who I was, and that I had this past, and that I was a freak and a fraud and a fake and a phony, and she would walk away or keep it a secret, and there would be a dark cloud of deception hanging over the relationship. And that night, as I went to sleep on my sweat-soaked futon on the floor, I made a decision. And when I went on our first date, I showed up dragging a duffel bag full of coke shame and pushing my self-loathing in front of me like a shopping cart full of obsolete rain-soaked newspapers. And in between the appetizer and the main course, I unloaded all my baggage on the table. And this woman is amazing. Well, this woman whose only flaw is that she turns the map to face the same direction that we're traveling. Reached across the table and scratched the side of my head like I was a big sheepdog and said, "You're just a little freak, aren't you?" And I have to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, the first 17 years of marriage have not been exactly what I thought they were going to be. They've been much better. Thank you. I thank you for that, but I'm running short on time, so I don't have time to waste on laughter and applause. Okay, so there was a delay in the publication of my first book, and I was becoming depressed. I can tell when I'm becoming depressed because I wake up in the morning and I go to shave and I see myself in the mirror and my first thought is, oh great, this guy again. I can tell at that point that my mood is about to spiral like Larry Flint at the Guggenheim. So I got a wow out of Andy Sell. So I didn't realize how bad the depression was getting until my wife said, you have to talk to somebody. You're absorbing all the light in the apartment. So I went to the Yellow Pages and I found a therapist and I made an appointment. But it is the nature of the human experience and the self-sustaining power of depression that I wrote down the time of the appointment and the address, but I didn't write down the office number or the guy's name. So on the appointed day, at the appointed time, I wound up wandering around a psychiatric building looking for help. You'd think they'd be on the lookout for that kind of thing. I still have no idea who I had an appointment with, but I found somebody in the building with a free hour. Well, not free, you know. Not actually an hour. You know how it works. So, an available session, and I went in. And he turned out to be a pretty good match for me. He does the right stuff. He mirrors my physical position, so I think he understands me. And he asks me how things make me feel. You know, all the therapist stuff. And a few weeks into this, I went to him and I said, hey, I walked past a martial arts studio. I'm thinking about signing up. And there were swords in the window, and I have a lot of swordplay experience. Oh, that's going to need some explanation. I studied swordplay. I went to the very pompous Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts in London, where I studied rapier and dagger and small sword and broadsword and buckler and quarterstaving. Oh, here's a funny story, I hope. I studied at the very pompous Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts in London, and in addition to all the swordplay, I studied, Shakespeare and textual deconstruction and theater history and contemporary acting styles and Alexander technique and voice and speech and elocution and breath control and tumbling. And while I was there, a friend of mine who was studying at the marginally less pompous London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art called me and said, I'm doing a production of a Tennessee Williams play. Will you come see me in it? Now, to my mind, nothing promises an evening of brilliant theater like English college students doing American Southern accents. So I put on my best go-to-theater shirt, and I went across town by tube to Lambda, where I saw this show, and there was a woman in it who was wonderful. So afterwards, when my friend said, would you like to come out with us for a pint? I said, sure. And I went out for a pint with him and the cast, and I was flirting with this woman, and I was young and thin and energetic, and I had my exotic American accent going for me, so that was good. And this woman was just adorable and funny and very attractive. And after about an hour and a half, I realized I had never learned her name. And there's a certain point in a conversation at which you can no longer say, I'm sorry, I'm too self-involved to be allowed out in public. So I tried to cover by saying, what is your full name? As though I was going to perform some numerological bar trick in which I added up the letters and told her. In fact, as I said it, I was devising a numerological bar trick in which I would add up the letters in her name. And she said, it's Julie Kate Olivier. And I said, oh, really? Any relation to Sir Lawrence? And I tried to make it clear that I knew she had heard this joke every day since she had gone into theater with that name. But she was perfectly comfortable with who she was. So she said, yes, he's my father. And I was young and I had ambition of Shakespearean proportions. And at this moment, the venal, greedy American in me just came to the fore, and for 2 hours I'd been thinking of her as a hot prospect, and now I was just thinking of her as a golden ticket. It's like that fast. I went from thinking of ways to take advantage of her to thinking of ways to take advantage of her. And I knew she would see it all in my eyes if I waited another second more, so I tried to cover by drinking the beer and steering my focus back to the curve of her neck and that place at the lip of her clavicle where I knew if I just touched it with my lips and breathed out through my nose, I could make her go, and just as quickly as that, I was imagining us waking up together in stiff British sheets and having tea over a tabletop in a kitchen nook with the cool British morning sunlight slanting through a window between us. And just as quick as that, unbidden into my fantasy, her father came down the stairs to join us, probably emerging from a tryst with Danny Kaye. He was wearing a maroon burgundy sort of bathrobe and matching velour slippers, and I could see the pale blue veins through the translucent flesh of his spindly old English actor legs, and the image was so clear and so vivid and so huge in my mind that it pushed the beer out through my nose. And in order to protect my expensive go-to-theater shirt, I caught it in my glass. And then I looked to Julie Kate Olivier, expecting her to say, oh, well done, or cricket, or jolly good, or whatever the hell British people say when they have witnessed ninja-like reflexes in action. And I saw a look of horror in her eyes, as from her perspective, this boorish American heard of her noble theatrical lineage and tried to impress her with a bar trick in which he recycled beer through his own sinus cavity into his glass. And I heard a voice in my head that spoke with elegant elocution and exquisite breath control, and it said, not to be. But I digress. My point is, I was doing a lot of swordplay while I was there. I was doing so much sword fighting that at one point someone took a photograph of me, and I said, why did you shoot me from that weird angle? And they said, no, that's what you look like. My right arm and shoulder were twice the size of my left from all the swordplay that I was doing, because I was doing 3 hours a day with the broadsword. So now I'd seen swords in a window, and I went to my therapist and said, I'm thinking of signing up for sword play. And he said, well, you know, Dylan, 30 to 40 minutes of aerobic activity 3 or 4 times a week can cure 80% of depression cases. He said it very quietly like that, as though he was afraid the other therapists might hear him, beat him up in the parking lot, giving away trade secrets. And then I had to explain to him, well, yeah, but non-athletic and academic intellectuals, Little League, brutalized and ridiculed, hand all sweaty, clouds and gnats. And he said, Dylan, are you a child in Schuylerville or an adult in Los Angeles? And that seemed like a direct challenge. So I went to JK Taekwondo in Burbank, and I signed up for a course of study. And it was very difficult at first. And by at first, I mean 12 minutes in, I had to go throw up. But I very quickly became enamored of the study of the art of my master, of the things that I was learning, the things that I was learning to do, the things that I was seeing other people do. It was all just extraordinary. And after a few months, I was working on a falling motion, a jumping, diving shoulder roll that I was supposed to learn. And I landed on my head, and I crinked up my neck very badly. And I went in to the studio the next day to find my master alone in his office. And I said, sir, I fell on my head and crinked up my neck. And he said, oh. And I waited, because I had seen Karate Kid. Surely he could slap his hands together, generate magical ki energy, and fix me. But he did not, because apparently my master is not an Asian stereotype. And I said, Sabanim. Sabanim is Korean. It means teacher and master, but there's a lot in it. Father, surrogate, and role model. There's a lot in the word Sabanim. I said, Sabanim, what should I do? And he said, oh, really bad. And I said, yes, sir, it's very bad. And he said, oh, a lifetime of training. And I said, a lifetime of training, sir? And he said, oh, maybe 10 or 15 years to training. And I said, and then I won't crink up my neck anymore when I fall on my head? And he said, no. Then you won't fall on your head. And I said, sir, it's an Asian doctor joke. And he said, huh? Because when he's really baffled, he turns into Scooby-Doo. And I said, I went into my doctor, I said, it hurts when I do this. He said, then don't do this. And Master Lim lit up, thrilled to be so thoroughly understood despite the language barrier. And he said, yes! That's a good doctor! You keep that doctor. And I said, sir, a lot of what we do in class hurts. Shouldn't I just quit altogether? And he looked so sad, as though he had disappointed me terribly as a master, and I had disappointed him terribly as a student. And he said, no, you know, quit. Martial artists never quit. And I said, but it hurts. Shouldn't I just stop? And he said, no. You stop when hurts, never learn to a different way. You fall on your head to hurt, you say, okay, I don't do it anymore. Then someday you're running, you trip, you fall on your head, you hurt. No, you learn a different way. I show it to you. He took me out on the mat, we took off our shoes, we bowed to each other. We bowed to the flags. He said, you show to me, falling motion. I said, you know the one, sir, the jumping, diving, falling one. He said, I know, you show to me. And I didn't want to, but I was learning to be a martial artist. I knew what was expected of me, and I said, yes, sir. And I did the jumping, diving shoulder. I tried to dive low to minimize the impact. And I landed on my head, and I crinked up my neck. And Master Lim laughed the laugh of a man who sees the obvious solution to a simple problem. He said, "Oh, Dylan, you have to jump higher." And I said, "Higher, sir, I'm jumping low, and it hurts." He said, "Yeah. No, I explain to you now. More high means to more time. You can't do many things at once, only one thing. You can't jumping thinking now I am soon falling and then falling, now I am soon to land. No, only one thing. Now I am jumping, now I am falling. Now, I could see him struggling for the vocabulary that he did not yet have in a second language. I was pretty sure I knew what he was trying to say, and I said, "Sir, are you telling me I need to leap into the present moment?" And he beamed at me like that first burst of sunlight that comes through the clouds at the end of a dark, rainy spell. And he said, "Yes, Darren! This is the thing all great athletes know. You learn this, you could be martial artists." And then again, as though he was rolling them around in his mouth for future use, he tried out the words for himself. He said, "Yes, Darren, leap into the present moment." Now, there comes a point in one's martial arts training at which one is expected to begin teaching. For me, this came after I had my second degree in Taekwondo, as I was getting ready to test for my second degree in Hapkido. I began teaching the adult classes late in the evening. I don't teach kids because I don't like children. I don't like children. They're short, and they don't know anything, and their focus is almost never entirely on me. Parenthetically, let me say this. I recently finally had to say to my mother that my wife and I will not be having kids because I do not like children. And without missing a beat, my mother said, "Oh, you get that from me?" So I was teaching the adult class late at night, and there were two young men who were hanging out at the studio. They were watching through the window in the front. They would go out and smoke, and then they would come in and they would sit and they would watch class. And when I had my students in Japanese it's the kiai, it's the yell that everyone associates with the martial arts. And it's a spirit-raising thing, and it changes the breath, and it changes the personal dynamic and the interpersonal. There's a lot in that yell that I'm not going to explain now because you're not my students. But when I would have my students key up, these kids would go hi-ya at each other and hit each other with the sides of their hands. And about halfway through class, Matt out of his office into the studio, I said, "Dylan, you come talk to me." And that made me nervous because he almost never interrupts class. I was afraid I had been teaching something wrong. I put a high belt in charge of the other students. I went into his office. And Master Lim said, "Dylan, those two boys watching to your class?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "After class, you wait till all students go home. Then outside, those two boys pick fight to you. You say to them, 'Okay.'" And I said, "Sir, are you telling me you want me to pick a fight with those boys?" He said, "No. My black belts never pick to fight. No. They pick fight to you. You say to them, 'Okay.'" I did not want to have a fight with two 20-somethings. I was into my 40s, and they were younger and probably had better stamina, and they were more testosterone-y. New from Chef Boyardee. I didn't want to. You don't test your skills that often. I didn't want to find out with the two and the. But I knew what was expected of me because I was a martial artist, and I said, "Yes, sir." And he could see the trepidation in my eyes, so to be reassuring, he said, "Don't worry, Dylan. I all the time am listening," which was less reassuring than he imagined. I went back out, I finished teaching class, and I suspect I was a little bit more authoritative, a little bit louder, a little bit more demanding of my students, using them for demonstrations, throwing them around a little more, just to do anything I could. I was trying to be bigger than I actually am to intimidate these. It's just a trick I learned from a cat. Oh, that's absolutely true. I learned that from Jojo Precious Tiger Kitty, the cat who could tell time. My wife and I used to live in an apartment in Studio City that had a courtyard. And Jojo Precious Tiger Kitty, the cat who could tell time, used to have free reign of the courtyard. He would wander around and he would relieve himself in the neighbors' flower beds and stuff. And then one day someone was moving in and they propped the door open and Joe got out into the world beyond the front door where there are other cats that hunt for food, not for sport, and protect their territory. And by the time we found him, he'd gotten into a fight. And his lip was cut, and he was all freaked out, and his hair was all standy out. And my wife works for a living because she has to support me. So she said, tomorrow, would you take the cat into the holistic vet? My wife has a holistic vet for all of our animals. I wouldn't do that. I'm homeophobic. I'm deathly afraid of herbal remedies. But I made an appointment with the holistic vet, and the next day I was supposed to take the cat in, and I grabbed him out, and he scratched me, and he bit me, and I dropped him and chased him down, and grabbed him, and he bit me, and I dropped him, and I chased him around the apartment for an hour and a half, weeping and crying and apologizing, and finally I stuffed him into this stupid carrying case. I closed the guy, put him in the car, and we drove to the vet with him complaining loudly at me and me weeping and apologizing, and I took him to the vet, and the vet took him out very easily and gave him acupuncture and gave me some goop to put on his lip, and I was supposed to do that, and I brought him home, and I put the goop on his lip, and after like a week, he was still all freaked out. He wouldn't come out of the closet, he wasn't eating, he was just, something was wrong, and my wife said, you gotta take him back tomorrow, and the next day I called the vet, and I said, I gotta bring Joe in again, and he said, okay, bring him down. I said, I don't want to fight with my cat. And he said, wait, what? And I told him the story about the arguing and the yelling and the biting and the scratching, and he laughed the laugh of a man who hears the obvious solution to a simple problem, and he said, okay, you may not need to bring the cat in. You got to pull Joe out of the closet, pin him on his back for 5 minutes. And I said, what is that going to do? And he said, look, your cat went out into the world and got his ass kicked by a cat. Every day he sees you and your wife go out into the world. Then he came in and he kicked your ass. He thinks he has to lead the pride now. He thinks he's the alpha male. He doesn't know how to work the can opener. He's freaked out. You need to let him know that you are stronger than he is, that you can run the family, that everything's going to be okay. Call me back, let me know how it goes. And I pulled Joe out of the closet, and I said, I'm so sorry, buddy, I got to do this. And I put him down on his back, and I held him there, and he clawed me with all 4 paws, with the claws fully extended, and he bit my finger for like 12 seconds. And then he went completely limp under my hand. And then he started to purr. And I scratched his chin with my finger, and he started to drool. And after 2 minutes, I let him go, and he stood up, and he rubbed against me a couple of times, and then waved his tail back and forth like a dying windshield wiper, and went off to the kitchen and ate all the food we had left out for him. And I called the vet and told him he was a genius. He mocked me mercilessly. But that's not the story about Joe that I was going to tell you. I once saw Joe keep a 180-pound Rottweiler from coming in through the sliding glass door because he did not want the dog in the house. He stood up on the tips of his toes, and he puffed up and spread his hair out and looked huge. And that was enough to convince the dog. So that was the technique I was using as I was teaching the class. And these 2 kids were standing on the side, and they were watching class, and the class ended, and my students bowed to me, and we bowed to the flags, and I sent them away. And as they cleared out, I stalled around, I swept the floor, and I emptied the trash, and cleaned the mirrors, straightened up all the kicking paddles, and ran out of stuff to do, and said, Master Lamb, I'm going now, since he was going to be listening. And I went out, and the 2 boys took up a position between me and the parking lot. And they sort of fanned out across the sidewalk. And one of them said, so, hey. And I said, hi. And he said, so you're a master? So I said, no, I'm just a black belt instructor. He said, oh, yeah. So you've been doing it a while, huh? I said, yeah, wow. How long you been doing it? I hate how long you've been doing it. Because at that point, I had been studying for 8 or 9 years. And there are some people who have heard that you can't get a black belt until you've been studying for at least 10 or 15 years. And to those people, you say, I was studying 8 or 9, and they go, oh, so it's fake and stupid, and you're not real. And then I know people who have been studying for 50 and 60 years, who are in their 70s and have been studying since they were children. And some people go, ooh, really, 8 years? And then I feel like an idiot, because I've only been studying 8 years. What are you oohing about? So I just said, yeah, it's a while. I don't know exactly. Let that hang in the air between us. And there was a lot of posturing and testing, but there was no actual challenge. And I didn't know what to do. And Master Lim stuck his head out of the studio and said, Dylan, you don't pick a fight to these boys, do you? And I said, no, sir. And he said, good. I don't want my black belts to picking fight. And one of the boys took up a position of authority and stepped forward and said, oh, your master doesn't want you fighting? At which point my master said, oh, I think maybe they want to fight to you. And the kid said, yeah, well, we'll fight them. And I knew what I was supposed to do, so I said, okay. Master Lim stepped past me toward the boys, and he said, okay, they want to fight to you, I help to you. And he stepped in front of me and stepped into his fighting stance. My master's fighting stance is the most terrifying thing in the world. I have sparred against my master. I have been kicked in the head by my master. It is not getting kicked in the head that scares me. It's the stance. My master's fighting stance is the stance of a janitor who's about to sweep a floor. It is the stance of a postal worker who is about to sort mail. It is the stance of a man who does what he does very well and intends to do it very quickly. And the demeanor of the boys changed just a little bit, and my master said, before we fight to you, who is your master? And the lead kid said, what? And he said, who teaches you Taekwondo, sends you to test my black belts? And the kid said, oh, we don't study Taekwondo. And he said, oh, so karate? Kung Fu? A little boxing? And the kid said, no, we just wanted to, we got street skills, man. And Master Lim laughed and turned his back on them and walked past me saying, you don't need my help, Dylan. And then very quietly, into my ear as he walked past, he said, only to key up loud. And I said, yes, sir. So I dropped into my fighting stance, which I think is stupid and goofy and makes me look like an idiot, but I key upped as loud as I could. And I swear to you, ladies and gentlemen, the kid in front put up his hands as though I had a gun. He said, hey, we were kidding around, man. We don't need to fight. And Master Lim said, oh, Dylan, I think maybe now they don't want to fight to you. And I said, yes, sir. And I dropped out of my fighting stance. And the kid said, how much does it cost to study here? And Master Lim said, you don't want to study here. My students work very hard, much discipline. You go down the street, big studio, you like. No discipline, very easy. And the kid said, but how much? $140, first 2 months, only come 1 o'clock every day, clean my mirrors. The kid said, $140 to clean your studio? And Master Lim said, you go down the street, you like, very easy. And he signaled me to come inside, and the boys backed up 10 or 12 steps before they turned their backs on us and walked off down the street, punching each other and making jokes at each other's expense. And my master took me into the studio, and he said, tonight you learn martial art. This important, this Hapkido. Never no need to fight, only to win. They come here, they don't know. I want to be who I am, I don't know. I want respect, I want strong. They see all the instructors give to me respect. They can't help, they give to me respect. They want to test to you, find out who they are. Then they see, I give you to respect. They can't help. Now they give to you respect. They show up. Maybe they can fight to you. Maybe they can. You win. They win. Nobody know. Now they can win. Everybody know. They walk away. This is martial art. This is natural. This is animal. And I said, sir, have you ever owned a cat? And Master Lim said, I don't like cat. I have cat one time. Never show me no respect. Move into my house. Say, I live here now. Make rule, no feet outside blanket. Very strict, my cat. Then one day my cat get to very sick, and then he later to dying. And I am so sad. Oh, my cat. I don't have two cat now. Oh, feet outside blanket. 2 week I can't do eating, no training, only sad. I don't like cat. I said, yes, sir. He made me take off my shoes. He took me out on the mat. It was the first time in years I had had his undivided attention, and for an hour and a half alone in the studio, he threw me around like a rag doll. And it was incredibly reassuring. Because frankly, there had been something a little bit nauseating in the thought of my master crying over a cat. So, now that you have a little bit of background on me and who I am, this is the piece that I wish to present to you this evening. I should preface it by saying this. It is in the nature of the human experience that we tend to overvalue our failures and undervalue our accomplishments. When I tested to become a master, a Taekwondo master, it was a 2-day test. It was a long thing where I had to do 26 empty hand forms and 12 sword forms and some advanced sword forms and falling motions and sparring techniques and kicking techniques and hand techniques, 32 hand techniques and 4 different stances and board breaking and brick breaking, and I had to spar one person, and I had to spar 2 people, and I had to spar 4 people, and I had to write a 2-page essay. And at the end of it's a cumulative test. It's stuff I had learned over years. So by the time I tested, from the time before the test to the time after the test, nothing had changed. I felt like a fake and a fraud and a phony when people started calling me master. And then 6 months later, I got the belt from Korea and the certificate, and nothing had changed. And I felt like a fake and a fraud. And I did not realize how universal this feeling was until I was in Boston to honor my father. He was stepping down as associate provost for the arts at MIT, or as some people pronounce it, arts at MIT. And I had written a bunch of jokes specifically for the occasion. I had written about his work and how I very much enjoyed coming east a year earlier to see his magnificent Heisenberg Uncertainty opera, an epic musicale during which it's possible to accurately determine either the position or the momentum of the fat lady at any given time. People left the theater every night saying, "What about the cat in the box? Was the cat okay?" I said that they had found him for the job when a member of the search committee was in England and happened to see his Cambridge University production of The Pirates of Penzance, starring Professor Stephen Hawking as the Pirate King. The singing wasn't great, but the choreography was innovative. And it's a great joke. And some people get nervous about that joke, but Professor Hawking himself has heard me do that joke and tells me I'm a very funny man. Although, in fairness, it's impossible to tell when he's being sarcastic. In any case, I'd written all these jokes specifically for MIT, and then after the show, this weird little man came over to me and said, that was brilliant. And I said, thank you. And my father saw me talking to him and said, Dylan, this is Alan Guth. I wanted you to meet him. I expect he's going to win a Nobel Prize in mathematics. He's the man who discovered that the universe is expanding. And I said, really? Because I told 12 minutes of jokes, and he said I was brilliant. And Alan Guth leaned forward and said, I didn't discover it. I just proved it mathematically. As though the other astrophysicists might beat him up in the parking lot for taking credit where it was not due. And I realized that we all tend to overvalue our failures and undervalue our accomplishments. And I did not really feel as though I was a master until after a class one night, a kid came up to me and said, I love it when you teach class because you close with that thing. And I knew what the thing was. It's my thing. I didn't learn it from Master Lim. I didn't learn it from a Bruce Lee movie. I didn't learn it anywhere. It's mine. I put it together from my knowledge and my theatrical training and my who I am and my Suddenly I am the purveyor of fine words and phrases and inarticulate grunting. And that thing is this. I would ask you, if you would, simply to close your eyes for a moment and listen to the sound of your breath. And if you're uncomfortable closing your eyes in a room full, in fact, you know what, open your eyes. I'm a martial arts master. I'm not pranking anyone. relax. All right, close your eyes. Listen to the sound of your breath. Just listen to the sound of your breath. That sound has been with you from the moment of your birth. That sound will be with you until the moment of your death. As long as you can find that sound, regardless of what else is happening in your world, everything is probably pretty much okay. Listen to your breath. Imagine a dark room. Imagine a candle at the center of the darkness. You are the candle at the center of the darkness. Listen to your breath. The darkness cannot touch you as long as you consume oxygen. You cast light. Listen to your breath. You are the light at the center of the darkness. The darkness cannot touch you. All that you have ever done, of which you are ashamed, for which you feel regret or remorse, lifts away from you insubstantial as smoke and gathers in the corners with the darkness. The darkness cannot touch you. You are the light at the center. Listen to your breath. All that you have ever done, of which you are proud, that came from a place of love, of caring, that was helpful to those around you or good for you, flows and cools and helps you to stand strong. You are the light at the center of the darkness. Listen to your breath. Cast light. Stand strong. Open your eyes. Thank you. Thank you all very much for coming out. Thank you all so much. Good night.